I am destroyed. You stand upon the brink of a precipice. You peer into the abyss, sick, dizzy. By slow degrees, your sickness and dizziness become a cloud. By gradations imperceptible, the cloud assumes a shape more terrible than any demon. It is the shape of a thought. It is the thought of what would be your sensations during a fall. And the thought becomes word. The single word. Jump. For the very reason that the thought involves the most ghastly and loathsome of all the most ghastly and loathsome images of death and destruction which have ever presented themselves to your imagination. For this very reason, you do now most vividly desire it. Reason screams, no, no. But the thought has occurred. The word has been spoken. Reason dies. If there be no friendly arm to check you, you will fall. Or again, you have a task before you which must be speedily performed. The most important crisis of your life calls for immediate action. You know it will be disastrous to delay. Your whole soul is on fire. Yes, the task must, it shall be undertaken today. But again, the cloud, the shape, the thought, the word, the single word, wait. You hesitate. Reason dies. The moments fly. The last hour of action is at hand. You tremble violently with the conflict of substance with shadow. And if the contest has proceeded thus far, if the thought has occurred, if the word has been spoken, the shadow will prevail, and your struggle is in vain. The clock strikes, the shadow flies, the energy returns. Now you will act. Alas, it is too late. Why will we not admit, in our consideration of the human soul, of this radical impulse, this primitive principle, this paradoxical something, this perversity? With certain minds, it is irresistible. The wrong of the action is the force which impels us to its prosecution. We act for the very reason that we should not act, or we do not act for the very reason that we should. We persist in acts because we feel we should not persist in them, and not because we desire to be well. No. It is something else, something antagonistic to our well-being. Cloud becomes thought, becomes impulse, becomes desire, becomes longing, and that longing, in defiance of all consequence, will be indulged. I am destroyed. It is impossible that any deed could have been wrought with such thorough deliberation. For weeks, for months, I pondered the means of murder. I rejected 1,000 schemes because they involved even a chance of detection. At length, reading some obscure memoirs, I found an account of a fatal illness which had occurred through the means of a candle accidentally poisoned. The idea struck my fancy at once. I knew of her habit of reading in bed. I knew, too, that her room was narrow and ill-ventilated. I need not vex you with details. I need not describe the ease with which I substituted a candle of my own making for the one by her bed. The next morning, she was discovered. The coroner's verdict: death by the visitation of God. Having inherited all, my life went well for years. The idea of detection never once entered my brain. The remains of the fatal candle I had myself carefully disposed. I had left no shadow of a clue by which I might be convicted or even suspected of the crime. How rich a sentiment of satisfaction arose in my bosom when I reflected upon my absolute security. For a very long time, I was inclined to rest in this security. It brought me more delight than all the mere worldly advantages accruing from my sin. But there arrived at length the cloud. By scarcely perceptible gradations, the cloud became a thought, a haunting and harassing thought. I could scarcely get it out of my mind for an instant. A harrowing, haunting thought, like a ringing in my ears or a snatch of song. The thought became a word, a single word. Tell. In my effort to shake off this nightmare of the soul, I began to walk vigorously. Faster, still faster. At length, I ran, and reason screamed, "Fool! Fool!" But the thought had occurred, the word had been spoken. Reason died. Each succeeding wave of thought brought new terrors, for, oh God, I must not think. I too well knew that to think further was to be lost. I quickened my pace. I felt a maddening desire to scream aloud. Hands clasped over my mouth, I bounded like a madman. Soon I drew pursuers. Could I have torn out my tongue, I would have done it. A rough voice in my ear, a rougher grasp on my shoulder, I gasped for breath. For an instant, I experienced all the sensations of strangulation. I became blind, deaf, giddy. And then an invisible hand struck me upon the back, and the long-buried secret burst forth from my soul. They say I spoke with a distinct enunciation, but with a passionate hurry, as if in dread of interruption. Before concluding the sentences that have consigned me to the hangman and to hell. We are all of us destroyed.